Sometimes, the universe whispers in ways we're not prepared to understand. From the quiet depths of the Sagittarius constellation, something has begun to move a traveler, ancient and uninvited, cutting through the dark at 58 kilometers per second, faster than anything bound to our sun could ever escape. Astronomers call it 3-Eye Atlas, the third interstellar object ever seen by human eyes, following Oumuamua and 2-Eye Borisov. Yet unlike them, this one behaves as if it remembers where it came from. It breathes jets of gas not away from the sun, but toward it, like a creature drawn home by light. And the vapor it releases, pure nickel without iron, defies every law we know of chemistry and creation. As Carl Sagan once said, somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Tonight, you will drift through that silence into a story where physics bends, sunlight flickers, and the edge between science and myth begins to blur. Close your eyes and listen. The question isn't just what 3-Eye Atlas is. The question is what it wants with the Sunday. Imagine the vast emptiness between stars. A silence so deep, it could swallow entire civilizations without leaving an echo. Out there, in that quiet gulf, an object drifts, neither star nor comet, nor anything that quite fits in the categories we have made to comfort ourselves. We call it 3-Eye Atlas. It does not belong here, and yet, somehow, it has found its way into the most delicate plane of our solar system, aligning almost perfectly with the thin sheet of space where all our planets circle the sun like beads on an invisible thread. That alone would be remarkable. The odds of a random interstellar traveler crossing paths with our ecliptic plane are about 0.2%. Space is three-dimensional, wild and unrestrained, but the solar system is flat, the way a lily pad floats on the surface of a pond. For 3-Eye Atlas to glide along that same surface is like a coin tossed across the ocean and landing edge up on a single wave. Astronomers double-checked their data, ran simulations, and found the same improbable result. It was as though the object had chosen a path of maximum attention, brushing past the realms of Mars, Venus, and Jupiter with a composure that felt rehearsed. When the numbers refuse to behave like chance, scientists begin to whisper about intention. Among those voices is Avi Loeb of Harvard University, who has never been shy about asking the questions that make others uneasy. Watching the trajectory unfold, he wondered aloud if we were seeing something more than a rock flung by the chaos of galactic tides. If an object moves in ways that defy our expectations of nature, he said, we must consider the possibility that it was made, not born. His words settled over the astronomical community like a fine dust, uncomfortable, persistent, impossible to sweep away. To understand why this suggestion caused such unease, you need to imagine the precision of 3-Eye Atlas's path. Most comets and asteroids meander through the solar system, their orbits pulled and twisted by gravity until they become chaotic spirals. But this one seemed to trace a deliberate curve, slipping just above the orbital lanes of our planets. It is not just that it moved fast, it moved right, too right. In the language of celestial mechanics, its inclination is nearly zero, meaning it obeys the same geometric plane as the planets. That would make sense for a body born inside our solar system, but for an interstellar visitor, it is statistically absurd. Even stranger was the way 3-Eye Atlas interacted with sunlight. Instead of releasing gases away from the sun, as ice and dust normally would, it appeared to vent material toward it, like a ship adjusting its thrust. The composition of that gas, pure nickel without iron, was a mystery on its own, but the direction of the outflow made scientists stop and stare. It looked almost intentional, as if the object were braking, or perhaps steering. Of course, no one could say that out loud without risking ridicule, so they wrapped their astonishment in phrases like non-gravitational acceleration and anomalous emission geometry. But even buried under jargon, the unease was there. The deeper you look, the more the universe invites you to wonder whether coincidence is just another form of design we cannot yet read. In the cold math of orbital dynamics, there is poetry numbers that suggest a quiet mind behind the motion. 3-Eye Atlas, like its predecessors, Oumuamua, and 2I, Borisov, crossed our awareness, not as intruders, but as mirrors. Each one reflects how quickly curiosity turns into fear when the familiar order of space is disturbed. Avi Loeb's insistence on considering the artificial is not born of fantasy but of intellectual discipline. He reminds us that the greatest danger in science is not being wrong but refusing to look. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, he once said, quoting Carl Sagan's famous line, but extraordinary evidence begins with the courage to ask extraordinary questions. Loeb's critics argue that the data are too thin, that the orbit, while strange, could still be explained by the random churn of interstellar debris. Yet his point is not to claim certainty, only to open the door. What if the anomaly is the message? Let us drift for a moment into the thought he offers. If 3I Atlas were designed, what kind of intelligence would send it? A civilization advanced enough to cross light years would not need to visit us with crude machinery. Perhaps it is not a vehicle but a fragment, a seed, a probe so small and subtle that it hides its purpose within the laws of physics themselves. Maybe it was launched long before we built our first telescopes, guided not by engines but by the slow mathematics of gravity and time. Or perhaps, as Loeb suggests, it is a piece of space archaeology, a relic left adrift by minds that no longer exist, their echoes gliding silently through the interstellar dark. The notion that 3I Atlas might have been placed, rather than flung, challenges more than science. It challenges our sense of solitude. The sky has always been our mirror, reflecting the illusion that we are the only observers. But what if we are also the observed? What if, from some unimaginable distance, someone or something once traced the delicate map of our solar system and drew a line that would one day cross our orbit, simply to be seen? These questions are not meant to frighten but to awaken. In the culture of astronomy, skepticism is sacred, but so is wonder. Every generation faces a moment when the data begin to tremble at the edge of explanation. Oumuamua gave us that moment in 2017. Now, with 3I Atlas, the cosmos is whispering again. And perhaps what unsettles us most is not the possibility of life elsewhere, but the reflection of our own longing to be noticed, to be part of a larger story. When you look up at the night sky, you are gazing through an ocean of motion. Everything moves, but not everything moves with purpose. 3I Atlas asks us to decide whether purpose can exist without mind, whether order can emerge without design. Maybe its path across the ecliptic is a coincidence so rare it feels like a message. Or maybe it is a message written in coincidence, meant only for those who would stop, listen, and wonder. As you breathe and let your thoughts drift with the stars, remember that science is not the opposite of mystery. It is the language we use to approach it. Avi Loeb's question is not a declaration, it is an invitation. To look again, to notice what does not fit, to understand that in a universe of infinite silence, even one whisper of intent would change everything. And so, we wait. The data will come, the numbers will be argued, the papers will be published. But beyond the equations, a quieter truth lingers in the dark. Somewhere between the planets, an object glides almost perfectly flat, almost perfectly aligned, as if rehearsing a story older than light itself. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything. As Richard Feynman once said, the imagination of nature is far greater than the imagination of man. 3I Atlas reminds us how small we are, and how vast that imagination might be, and so the question lingers in the space between data and belief. If 3I Atlas truly moved with purpose, then what was that purpose leading toward? In October 2025, the answer, or at least the next chapter of the mystery passed behind the Sunday Earth, rotated into the blind spot of its own orbit, unable to see what unfolded near Mars. Out there, beyond the warmth of our instruments, 3I Atlas slipped through the thin red light of another world, and for the first time, our telescopes could not follow. At that moment, the entire solar system seemed to hold its breath. Mars was in perfect position to witness whatever this interstellar visitor might do next. A fleet of orbiters circled the planet, the American Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the European ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, the Chinese Tianwen-1, and the UAE's Hope mission. Each was capable of capturing images sharp enough to reveal a rover's shadow on the Martian dust. For months, mission teams had prepared commands to track 3I Atlas during its approach, to measure its light, to decode the signature of its tail. This was the opportunity scientists had dreamed of since Oumuamua's brief visit years ago. A second chance to watch a traveler between stars in close proximity. Then the silence came. In late September, a political deadlock in Washington froze NASA's operations. The government shutdown began, grounding communications, delaying uploads, leaving entire teams locked out of their offices. Suddenly, the timing was perfect in the worst possible way. As 3I Atlas reached its closest point to Mars, the people who could have observed it were forced to turn off their screens. The European Space Agency released a single blurred image, a faint streak crossing a red sky, the barest evidence of something there at all. NASA released nothing. Neither did China or the UAE. No telemetry, no spectra, no confirmation. Just silence. The public, already restless after years of half answers and missing data, began to whisper. Was it coincidence that the shutdown happened during the exact window of observation? Was it mere bureaucracy, or the first sign of deliberate secrecy? To most scientists, the answer was mundane. Space is unforgiving, and data gaps happen, but the pattern was too poetic to ignore. Whenever something extraordinary appears in our skies, the story seems to vanish just when curiosity peaks. As one researcher joked in an online forum, "It's as if the universe waits for our cameras to blink." Yet others did not laugh. Within days, message boards and social media filled with speculation. Anonymous users claimed that internal ESA files described unexpected structure in the 3I Atlas image set. Others said the brightness curve did not match a comet at all, but something metallic, reflective, geometric. Each rumor grew on the vacuum left by official silence. Avi Loeb, again, stepped into the conversation not as a prophet of alien intent, but as a scientist frustrated by the way information can disappear into bureaucracy. "When the data vanish," he said, "so does our chance to learn. Nature doesn't wait for our politics to resolve." His words resonated because they pointed to something deeper than conspiracy. The universe does not pause for us. When we let the machinery of government interrupt the machinery of discovery, we lose moments that will never return. Still, the timing was uncanny. In a year when the world's telescopes were finally capable of collaborating across nations, an object from another star system passed through the only region we could not see. The sun itself became a veil, blocking our view as Earth fell into conjunction. Even without the shutdown, observations from our planet would have been impossible. From a storytelling point of view, it was perfect. A cosmic stage, a single spotlight, and an audience forced to listen in the dark. For weeks after the event, amateur astronomers searched for any trace of new data. They scanned the ESA archives, cross-checked Chinese telemetry leaks, even tracked the schedules of Mars orbiters, but no images appeared beyond the one blurred streak. In that emptiness, imagination took root. Some claimed 3I Atlas had released probes near Mars. Others believed it entered the thin atmosphere to map the surface. A few even speculated it had slowed down intentionally, a hypothesis that tied back to the idea of a reverse Oberth maneuver, using the sun's gravity not to escape but to stay. Beneath all the speculation, however, lay a quieter truth about human nature. When we do not know, we fill the silence with story. The line between data and myth becomes porous. The phrase "government shutdown" became, in the minds of many, a metaphor for something larger, a shutdown of curiosity, a pause in transparency, a wall between wonder and understanding. And in that sense, perhaps the reaction itself became part of the phenomenon. 3I Atlas no longer existed only in the sky. It lived in the collective imagination, reshaping the way we think about cosmic discovery and institutional control. Richard Feynman once said, Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. He meant that real progress comes from doubting authority, from looking again when everyone says the case is closed. If Feynman were alive today, he might smile at the chaos surrounding 3I Atlas and say that curiosity, not certainty, is what keeps science alive. Maybe the mystery of Mars and the missing data is not proof of deception but proof of how fragile our systems are when faced with the unknown. Still, the human heart resists coincidence. The idea that a government shutdown could so perfectly obscure a celestial event feels too precise to be random. Even among scientists, the timing was called cosmically inconvenient. Some wondered whether the real lesson was not about aliens or secrecy, but about vulnerability, how our search for truth depends on political stability, how easily the night sky can slip away when budgets stall and servers go offline. Months later, when the shutdown lifted and agencies resumed work, the missing data remained missing. Engineers cited technical issues, corrupted files, incomplete transmission. ESA's raw archives were locked under review. NASA released a brief statement, noting that no unusual activity was detected, though no one outside the agency could verify what unusual meant. The Chinese and Emirati missions offered no comment at all. In a world connected by instant communication, the silence was louder than any announcement. In the calm that followed, the question became philosophical again. What if the data we lose are part of the message? What if the universe is teaching us humility through its timing, reminding us that discovery is not guaranteed, that even with satellites circling every planet, we can still miss the moment that matters most? The event near Mars, whether ordinary or extraordinary, slipped through our grasp like a whisper carried by solar wind. Perhaps, in another century, someone will find the raw files hidden in a forgotten archive. Perhaps they will see nothing but noise and static, or perhaps they will find something that changes how we understand our place in the cosmos. Until then, the October passage of 3I Atlas remains a riddle framed by two silences, the one before we could see, and the one after no one spoke. In the end, what frightens us is not the idea of secrets, but the possibility that the universe keeps its own secrets, indifferent to whether we are listening. Mars turned red and silent as always. The sun burned on, its glare erasing the truth for a few brief weeks, and somewhere beyond that light, 3I Atlas continued its quiet journey unseen, unrecorded, unexplainable. Maybe that is the lesson. The cosmos does not owe us clarity. It offers moments, fleeting and fragile, and asks whether we have built a world capable of catching them. For a visitor like 3I Atlas, a government shutdown is nothing. For us, it is everything. And perhaps, as Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. In the weeks after the Mars event, the silence from every major space agency began to take on a life of its own. Scientists moved on, but the public could not. Silence, after all, is the most fertile ground for imagination. When the sky refuses to speak, people start listening to whispers from the shadows of the internet. A Portuguese amateur astronomer soon uploaded an image that fractured the calm. The photo, grainy but strangely compelling, showed something angular edges, symmetry, suggestion of design where randomness should reign. He claimed it was 3I Atlas, captured during its brief approach. Within hours, it spread across forums and social media. Some dismissed it as artifact or pixel noise. Others swore it was proof of structure, the outline of something made, rather than born. Then came the leak. On a message board known for rumor more than revelation, an anonymous user posted what they called ESA internal telemetry. It claimed that 3I Atlas was venting pure nickel, with no iron chemically impossible. It emitted no measurable heat even as it skimmed near the Sunday. Its orbit was too perfect, aligned not just with the ecliptic but with the Milky Way's core, as though it were aimed from the galaxy's heart. And most provocatively, it called the object a post-biological entity, a machine evolved beyond organic form, powered by quantum coherence, a Q-ball engine. Normally, such a post would vanish into obscurity. But this one lingered, because parts of it proved oddly consistent. Spectroscopic data confirmed traces of nickel, though no one could explain the missing iron. That coincidence was enough to set the internet ablaze. Podcasts, journalists, and even scientists began asking whether some part of the leak could be genuine. Avi Loeb, when asked, offered quiet restraint. When an extraordinary claim appears, he said, the question is not whether it feels true, but whether it can be tested. But online, emotion had already taken over. People wanted the silence of Mars and the blur of Issa's photo to mean something larger, something purposeful. The leak gave them that narrative, a secret too vast for institutions to reveal. For scientists, the problem wasn't just the claim, it was what it revealed about our age. Data leaks now rival discovery papers. The myth of the insider has replaced the rigor of the laboratory. Richard Feynman once warned, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." In the story of 3I Atlas, it wasn't clear who was fooling whom. Was the leak a hoax, a misread dataset, or something never meant to be seen? The most haunting detail was the absence of heat. Anything near the sun should glow, yet 3I Atlas remained cold. Some proposed reflective materials or magnetic shielding, but none fit. If it truly retained its chill, it meant control precision beyond natural physics. Perhaps it was not a comet, but an engineered probe, harvesting solar energy without burning. The term post-biological entity carried its own poetry. It suggested evolution beyond flesh, a transition from carbon to code. Some scientists have long speculated that advanced civilizations might abandon biology, merging into durable, radiation-proof forms. To imagine 3I Atlas as such a being cold, deliberate, unhurried, was both beautiful and unsettling. Skeptics urged patience. The nickel could be calibration error. The orbit could be coincidence magnified by human pattern-seeking. Extraordinary coincidences happen every day, said planetary scientist Sarah Hurst. The universe is vast enough to make the improbable routine. But people were no longer satisfied with routine. The story became a mirror of its time, faith in institutions fading, curiosity moving to the edges. The Portuguese astronomer vanished from view. The image was dissected pixel by pixel, but no one could reproduce it. Issa denied any leak. Still, the myth endured in podcasts, documentaries, and late-night conversations beginning with, "What if?" Carl Sagan once said, "It pays to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out." Between skepticism and wonder lies a narrow bridge, and 3I Atlas was testing its strength. To dismiss every anomaly is arrogance. To believe every rumor is surrender. Somewhere in between lies the true practice of science. Slow, patient, listening to what the cosmos is trying to say. And perhaps that is what makes this story so haunting. In an age when data can be faked with a click, the boundary between revelation and illusion grows faint. The leak may have been fantasy, but the emotion behind it, the hunger for meaning, for signs of other minds, was real. We are a species that gazes into the dark and imagines faces looking back. Whether those faces exist or not almost doesn't matter. The act of wondering is what makes us human. Months passed, and the orbiters returned to routine, mapping dust storms and polar ice. Officially, nothing unusual had ever occurred, yet the myth refused to fade. It lived on in quiet videos, in midnight talk shows, in the private hope that maybe, just maybe, something out there had noticed us first. As Freeman Dyson once said, "The universe is showing us only hints. The rest is left for our imagination." Perhaps that is what 3I Atlas has become, not a messenger, but a mirror for our longing to believe. A story born of silence, shaped by doubt, carried by the fragile light of human curiosity. And in that silence, as the sun burned and Mars turned red below, the possibility remained. Maybe it was nothing more than rock and metal, cold and indifferent. Or maybe, drifting beyond sight, it was something more. A memory of intelligence written in motion, crossing the solar wind with purpose we cannot yet name. The more the world searched for answers, the quieter 3I Atlas became. After the rumors of the leak faded into a haze of speculation, the object vanished once again into the unreachable brightness near the Sunday. For a moment, humanity's attention wavered. Scientists went back to their data. The internet turned to other distractions. But the cosmos has its own timing, its own rhythm for revelation. And just as the whispers of the leak began to die, Mars, our silent red neighbor, spoke. On October 4th, 2025, one of the most reliable eyes ever built by humankind looked up. The Perseverance rover, standing alone on the Martian surface beneath a pale pink sky, captured a photograph that would ignite yet another wave of wonder and doubt. In the thin air of the Jezero crater, its camera recorded what appeared to be a long, luminous streak stretching across the heavens, 50,000 kilometers in length. If the angles were interpreted correctly, a line of light so vast that it seemed to slice through the sky like a scar. NASA's official explanation came quickly and predictably. The streak, they said, was a motion artifact, a result of a long exposure as the rover tracked the stars. The light was ordinary, just rendered strange by time and technology. But for many, that answer only deepened the mystery. Because this time, unlike countless other Martian anomalies that had been dismissed with technical precision, NASA did not release the original data. No raw images, no detailed metadata, just a single processed frame and a brief statement. And when institutions withhold, curiosity expands. The image spread across the internet in hours. Astrophotographers and analysts began recreating exposure patterns, trying to reproduce the effect. Some found plausible similarities. Others found nothing that could mimic the geometry of that perfect, even line. It was too straight, too defined, too deliberate. Soon, someone compared the photograph's coordinates with the calculated position of 3I Atlas during that week. The alignment was chillingly close. According to orbital data, the object would have passed near Mars's orbit almost exactly when Perseverance looked up. Avi Loeb, when asked about the coincidence, responded with his trademark calm. "Nature does not play with geometry," he said. "If you see straight lines in the sky, you should first ask if you are looking at your own reflection." His point was both poetic and skeptical. Perhaps the line was a product of our instruments, or perhaps of our longing. Yet even his measured tone could not smother the spark. To the public, it was too perfect a sequence: the silence of Issa, the leak, and now a photo from another planet that seemed to point at the same enigma. For decades, Mars has been our mirror. We send machines there not only to study rocks, but to look back at ourselves from a distance. Perseverance was built for science, but it has become something else. A storyteller in exile, transmitting fragments of beauty and mystery from a world that cannot answer. The idea that one of its images might have captured an interstellar traveler, a cylindrical vessel, perhaps, gliding past the red horizon, felt almost mythic. It connected ancient wonder with modern data, myth with machine. NASA's explanation, though logical, lacked the warmth of wonder. They said the exposure lasted several seconds, that the rover's motion relative to the stars could stretch light sources into streaks, and yet, independent astronomers pointed out inconsistencies. The streak's brightness remained uniform from end to end. The spectral data hinted at reflected sunlight, not sensor noise, and there was no visible curvature, no fading, no dispersion, a featureless blade of white cutting through rust-red sky. "If it's just a camera glitch," one astrophysicist said, "it's the most beautiful glitch in the history of Mars." That comment, half in jest, captured the spirit of the moment. Between skepticism and wonder, people began to dream again. Some imagined a vessel, a titanic cylinder, turning slowly as it maneuvered near Mars, using gravity or light as fuel. Others envisioned something even stranger, a remnant of a post-biological entity, the same kind mentioned in the leak, silently observing from the edge of the solar system. The rationalists called it projection, an illusion born of our desire to believe that we are not alone. The dreamers called it a sign. Carl Sagan once wrote, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." Maybe that is why every unexplained image feels personal. The streak on Mars wasn't just a line of light, it was a question drawn across the canvas of our collective imagination. Each person who looked at it filled in the blank with their own reflection, faith, fear, hope, or skepticism. In that sense, 3I Atlas had already achieved something profound. It made us look up and wonder if the universe might be looking back. Weeks passed, and NASA stayed silent. When asked for the raw files, the agency cited data compression protocols and transmission errors. "We have nothing further to add," one spokesperson said, a line that became infamous among space enthusiasts. Independent researchers, unable to verify anything, were left in limbo. Without new information, speculation hardened into folklore. On Reddit threads and late-night radio shows, people spoke of the Martian light as though it were a visitation. Others took comfort in Loeb's pragmatism, repeating his earlier warning: "If it walks like a comet and talks like a comet, start with the comet." Still, the image lingered. Some artists recreated it in oils and digital renderings. Musicians sampled it into ambient compositions. A new generation discovered awe not in proof, but in uncertainty. Perhaps that is what science for sleep truly means, not finding answers, but resting in the quiet vastness of the question. Even within the halls of academia, a few voices admitted the event's poetic resonance. "It's the coincidence that unsettles us," said planetary scientist Katie Stack Morgan, one of NASA's deputy project scientists for Perseverance. "Mars? 3I Atlas? The sun between us? It's as though the universe knows how to write a good story." Her words, meant lightly, carried a deeper truth. The cosmos is not bound by our skepticism. It moves in patterns both random and symphonic, and sometimes, for reasons we may never know, those patterns converge into something that feels deliberate. Imagine the scene again. A machine built by human hands, sitting on alien soil, staring up into the thin Martian air. The faint hum of its internal systems, the red dust dancing in low gravity, and above it a line of light, sharp and silent, crossing eternity. It could be an artifact. It could be data noise, or it could be the distant shadow of something that traveled farther than we can yet dream. Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." Maybe that is the quiet lesson behind the photograph. The universe doesn't explain itself. It simply reveals glimpses, like threads of starlight trailing across the unknown. We are left to interpret, to imagine, to feel the pulse of wonder that no equation can capture. And so, the streak of light above Mars remains neither proof nor illusion, but something in between. It invites us to look again, to think slower, to breathe under the same infinite sky that connects all worlds. Whether it was 3I Atlas or nothing more than the poetry of chance, it has already done what every true mystery does. It has made us remember how small and how beautiful it is to not yet know. The image from Perseverance refused to fade. It lingered like an afterimage on the human imagination. A streak of light carved across the Martian sky, impossible to touch, impossible to forget. When data vanished and agencies turned silent, speculation did what it always does. It bloomed. If that luminous line truly marked the passage of something vast, perhaps it wasn't merely passing by. Perhaps it had a destination, and for many, that destination could only be Mars. That was how the theory began quietly, in late-night threads and whispered discussions. They called it the construction on Mars. It was not about invasion, but creation. To its believers, 3I Atlas was not a comet but a mothership, an architect returning to inspect something long in the making, a visitor from the stars, drawn back to a red world that myths once called divine. Evidence, or something like it, appeared quickly. Machine learning filters revealed vertical shadows near the equator too straight, too symmetrical. Old NASA images were re-examined, and familiar shapes emerged where none had been seen before. A tower rising from dust, an archway cut into a crater wall. "Nature rarely builds right angles," someone wrote, and the internet agreed. Each pixel became a revelation. NASA denied it all. calling the shapes tricks of light or geological coincidence. But silence, even when innocent, sounds like secrecy. And the more the agencies insisted there was nothing, the more people believed there must be something. It wasn't new since the face on Mars of the 1970 seconds. The red planet has been our mirror, reflecting both science and myth. Avi Loeb offered a gentle warning. The line between imagination and investigation is thinner than we think, but one must walk it with evidence, not with hope. His words slowed no one. Beneath the theory lay something deeper, a yearning. The thought that someone might be building something on Mars touched a quiet hunger in us. It made the planet feel alive again, not just as rock and dust, but as a place with purpose. Online, the supposed construction sites gained names: the obelisk, the entryway, the array. People mapped them, connecting their coordinates with 3I Atlas's orbit. The geometry, they said, was a message. One viral video traced a triangle between Perseverance's landing site, a tower shadow, and the object's trajectory. Coincidence, NASA said. Connection, the believers replied. The truth, as always, lived somewhere between. The human mind evolved to find patterns. It's how we survive and how we dream. When dust swirls into shapes, our minds build stories around it. To some, that's superstition. To others, it's the spark of discovery. As Carl Sagan said, we are star stuff contemplating the stars. Maybe these stories are our way of asking whether something out there is contemplating us in return. Soon, another layer of intrigue appeared. Social media posts about the structures began vanishing. Videos were flagged for lack of context. Image boards wiped clean. Even skeptics noticed. If there was truly nothing, why hide it? The silence of institutions became its own kind of confirmation. Transparency, said planetary geologist Paul Byrne, is the currency of science. When you lose it, you lose trust. What drew people in was not fear, but wonder. The idea of construction on Mars resonated because it mirrored our own ambitions. Humanity, after all, is already building their rovers, habitats, prototypes of permanence. Maybe 3I Atlas isn't our predecessor, but our reflection. Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." And yet, we can't stop searching for sense. We find rectangles in rock and call them messages. Maybe it's folly, maybe faith, but all discovery begins with the refusal to accept that the unknown must stay unknown. To believers, 3I Atlas is the architect returning to its worksite. To skeptics, it's pareidolia, shadows, and shapes. Yet both sides share the same impulse. Curiosity. Perhaps one day, when humans walk those coordinates, we'll find only dust. Or perhaps, as the theory suggests, we'll uncover something older than history, a cathedral half buried in red sand, humming softly with the echoes of a civilization that learned to live forever. Until then, Mars keeps its silence. 3I Atlas drifts on watching, or gone. What endures is the question it left behind, whispered through every telescope and dream. What if we are not the builders, but the inheritors? And perhaps that's the true heart of this story. Whether the theory proves false or not, it reveals something essential about us, that even in skepticism, we long to believe the universe is alive with intention. And in that longing, that fragile blend of science and wonder, we glimpse what makes humanity worth the mystery itself. The rumor of construction on Mars had barely begun to cool when another revelation stirred the imagination of the world. What began as whispers in science forums soon rippled into headlines. The interstellar object 3I Atlas, it seemed, was tracing a path back to one of the most haunting mysteries in the history of astronomy, the Times Wow! Asterisk signal. For those who remember, the Times Wow! Asterisk signal was a whisper from the stars that arrived one summer night in 1977. It lasted just 72 seconds, captured by a radio telescope at Ohio State University, a narrowband pulse so precise that it bore the unmistakable fingerprint of intelligence. No star, no planet, no cosmic background noise had ever spoken in that frequency before. When astronomer Jerry Eamon circled the data printout and wrote the word times wow asterisk in red ink, he gave it a name and, perhaps unknowingly, a prophecy. Now, 48 years later, Avi Loeb and his colleagues at Harvard had traced the inbound trajectory of 3I Atlas and realized something uncanny. The object had come from the very same region of space where the times wow asterisk signal had originated. More than that, the math lined up perfectly. If an object had left that location in 1977, traveling at 58 kilometers per second, it would arrive in our solar system right now. Coincidence, most said. But even scientists sometimes pause when coincidence begins to look like choreography. Avi Loeb, cautious but intrigued, phrased it simply. If nature were a poet, he said, this would be its rhyme. His words were neither confirmation nor denial, just acknowledgement of the strange symmetry. And yet the thought that a radio signal could have been a message, a cosmic knock on our door, followed decades later by a visitor, was irresistible. It gave the story of 3I Atlas a new dimension, not just scientific but almost mythic. The times wow asterisk signal has always been a riddle with no edges. Its frequency, 1,420 megahertz, is tied to the spectral line of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, the fundamental building block of everything. Many have argued that if an extraterrestrial civilization were to announce its presence, it would use that channel. It is, in a sense, the universal language of physics. When the signal appeared, strong and pure, scientists scoured the skies for a repeat, but it never came. No second pulse, no follow-up, no pattern, just one clear voice, speaking once and disappearing. For decades, it was catalogued as an anomaly, a statistical ghost. But now, with 3I Atlas approaching from that same direction, the past seemed to echo. To imagine that the signal might have been a message, "We are coming," is to flirt with the sublime. The logic seems almost cinematic. A civilization sends a radio greeting across the void, then dispatches a probe or vessel toward the source of the message. 48 years later, the timeline converges exactly. For those who believe in patterns, it is almost too elegant to be random. For skeptics, it is precisely that elegance that proves it cannot be real. The universe, after all, rarely tells stories that make sense to us. Neil deGrasse Tyson once remarked, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." And yet, it is human nature to seek that sense, to weave meaning into coincidence until it becomes destiny. The connection between 3I Atlas and the times wow asterisk signal is, by all scientific measure, fragile. The error margins in both direction and distance are vast, but emotionally, the link feels magnetic. It reminds us of how small we are, how hungry we are for company, how even the faintest alignment of numbers can stir the oldest longing, the wish not to be alone. In the late nights of October 2025, amateur astronomers pointed their antennas toward the region of the sky where the times wow asterisk signal once sang. They listened for hours, hoping for a second whisper. Nothing came. The cosmos held its breath, or perhaps it had already spoken, and we had missed the rest of the sentence. The quiet was almost theatrical, as if the universe itself knew the power of pause. For Loeb, the fascination was not just emotional but methodological. When two improbable events align, he wrote in a Harvard note, we must at least ask if they share a cause. His statement wasn't a claim, it was an invitation to curiosity, the same one that drove Galileo to aim a telescope at the sky, or Einstein to wonder why light refused to bend to Newton's will. Science, at its best, begins with the courage to ask unreasonable questions. The beauty of the times, wow asterisk connection lies not in its proof, but in its poetry. If 3I Atlas did come from that direction, it means that somewhere, 48 years ago, a message and a messenger began their journey together, a pulse of light and a shard of matter, traveling across time toward the same destination. Imagine that. Two forms of communication, one intangible and one physical, synchronized across space to arrive at our doorstep within a single human lifetime. Even if coincidence, it is a magnificent one. But there is another, quieter interpretation, one that scientists whisper with reverence rather than fear. Perhaps the connection is not a sign of visitors, but a mirror of our own yearning. Maybe the times, wow, asterisk signal, and 3I, Atlas, are unrelated, but our instinct to bind them together reveals something sacred about the human mind. Our compulsion to find harmony in chaos, to see design in randomness. As Carl Sagan said, somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Perhaps that something isn't out there. It's within us, in the way we keep listening even after decades of silence. Yet, for all our rationalizations, the symmetry remains. 1977 to 2025, 48 years. The same direction, the same mystery of purpose. A signal that said nothing, followed by an object that behaves like it has a secret. It is as though the universe wrote a poem in 2 stanzas, separated by half a century, and left it for us to decipher. If the Times wow asterisk signal truly was a message, then perhaps 3I Atlas is not the answer, but the question. Maybe it wasn't saying, "We are coming," but something more profound, something that our language cannot translate. A statement about connection, distance, or time itself. Perhaps it was simply a greeting sent into the dark, a gesture of cosmic curiosity that mirrors our own. Whatever the truth, the alignment between 3I Atlas and the Times wow asterisk signal has reignited one of the most haunting questions in science. What if we have already been contacted, and we simply didn't know how to listen? It's a question that humbles even the most skeptical minds. As the sun dips behind Mars, and the faint whisper of radio static hums across the vacuum, the story of 3I Atlas continues to unfold. Whether comet or craft, random or deliberate, it has already achieved something monumental. It has made us look backward and forward at once, reminding us that every unanswered signal and every unexplainable light might still be part of a grander dialogue. Perhaps, one day, another pulse will come from that same direction, and this time, we'll be ready to hear it. Until then, we remain, as we have always been, a young species beneath an ancient sky, staring into the dark, waiting for the universe to finish its sentence. If the Times wow asterisk signal was the whisper that began this story, then perhaps what comes next is its echo. Because while humanity was still marveling at the possibility of an interstellar messenger tracing its path from that mysterious radio origin, 3I Atlas was already performing something that seemed almost deliberate, something that defied the expectations of celestial mechanics. As October 2025 drew to a close, it approached the sun in silence, entering the blinding region where no telescope could follow. And in that brief window of invisibility, a new theory emerged, one that would shift the entire tone of the conversation from wonder to unease. Astronomers call it the reverse Oberth maneuver. To understand why it matters, you must first understand what the Oberth effect is. In simple terms, it is a principle of rocketry. When a spacecraft fires its engines near a massive body, say, a planet or a star, its propulsion becomes far more efficient. The gravitational well acts as an amplifier, multiplying the energy of the burn. Humanity has used it to slingshot probes to the outer planets, to gain speed, to escape, but the Times reverse, Times Oberth maneuver, does the opposite. It uses gravity not to accelerate, but to brake, to slow down, to stay. On Oberth. According to orbital calculations, 3I Atlas would reach perihelion, its closest point to the Sun, on the 29th of October 2025. On that same day, the Earth would be positioned almost exactly on the opposite side of the Sun, rendering direct observation impossible. For several weeks, the object would be hidden behind that blazing curtain of plasma, invisible even to our most powerful instruments. When it emerged again in December, its path would tell the story. If its trajectory had changed from a hyperbolic escape to an elliptical orbit, it would mean one thing only. 3. I Atlas had stopped trying to leave. It had decided to stay. Avi Loeb once said, "The most dangerous assumption in science is that we already know what nature is capable of." His words echo through this moment like a quiet warning, because if an interstellar object can perform a maneuver so precise, so deliberate, it challenges the very boundary between natural and artificial. Comets do not break. They do not choose to remain. They come, they flare, they leave. A reverse Oberth maneuver, by its very nature, implies intent. Of course, the official stance from observatories is caution. The sun, they remind us, is a trickster. Gravitational perturbations, solar radiation pressure, and non-gravitational outgassing can all distort an orbit in ways that mimic control. And yet, the mathematics of this event are uncomfortably perfect. The timing, the alignment, the very invisibility of the maneuver all coincide with the single period when no human eyes can watch. If you were an engineer trying to conceal a course correction, you could not choose a better moment. Some have compared it to a deep breath. Imagine a ship arriving at the heart of a solar system, decelerating gently within the furnace of a star, its engines or whatever analog of propulsion it might use, absorbing the raw energy of sunlight, converting momentum into stillness. To the human mind, the idea feels both terrifying and beautiful, because what kind of intelligence chooses not to pass through, but to remain tethered to a star? In online forums, the theories multiplied. Some suggested that 3I Atlas was deploying energy collectors, vast reflective panels that could only function in close solar proximity. Others speculated about reconnaissance, that it was mapping electromagnetic fields or scanning for biosignatures on the inner planets. The most poetic claimed it was simply resting, feeding on light like a cosmic whale in a sea of plasma. But beneath all the wonder was a question no one could escape. If it stays, what happens next? For astrophysicists, the data blackout was agony. With the Earth positioned behind the Sun, even instruments at Lagrange points had limited visibility. NASA's Parker Solar Probe and ESA's Solar Orbiter were too close to capture a full orbital picture. The earliest opportunity to see 3I Atlas again would come in early December, when it re-emerged from solar conjunction. Every telescope on Earth, every array in space, would turn to watch. There was precedent, of course, for anomalies near the Sunday comet 96P divided by Machholz, for instance, exhibits unusual chemical properties, including a depletion of carbon and cyanogen. Some near-Sun comets fragment or flare in unpredictable ways, but none had ever shown an intentional slowing of orbital velocity. If this object truly performs a reverse Oberth, said theoretical physicist Kip Thorne, it would be the first known instance of an artifact interacting with gravity as though it were technology, not geology. His comment, half speculative, half poetic, only fueled the growing fascination. The implications reach beyond astronomy. If 3I Atlas is capable of using the Sun itself as a mechanism of propulsion or braking, it represents a level of mastery that human science only dreams of. To manipulate gravity, light, and motion with such finesse would require an understanding of physics beyond our current horizon. And yet, there it was, moving or pausing within reach of our own star. To some, this hypothesis feels too grand, too cinematic. Perhaps the truth is simpler. Maybe 3I Atlas is a fragment of something larger, its apparent precision, a coincidence of nature. The cosmos, after all, is filled with illusions of design. Spiral galaxies, fractal clouds, magnetic filaments, they all look deliberate, but they are born of chaos. As Neil deGrasse Tyson once noted, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. Perhaps 3A Atlas is just another reminder of that humility. And yet, the heart resists dismissal. There is something about the timing, the geometry, the silence that feels intentional. It's not that people want times to believe, it's that the alternative is even stranger. If this maneuver is purely natural, then the universe is capable of producing phenomena that mimic intelligence with perfect accuracy, and that, in its own way, is just as unsettling. In the mythology of flight, the moment before landing is always sacred. A bird lowering its wings, a ship lowering its sails. The reverse Oberth maneuver, if real, would be the cosmic equivalent a gesture of arrival. The sun, long regarded as the heart of our system, might suddenly host an uninvited guest in orbit. Not a comet passing through, but a presence staying to watch. By December, the telescopes will know. Either 3I Atlas will emerge on a new path, looping gently around our star like a captured moon, or it will continue outward, leaving behind only questions. But until that moment, the idea will live in the space between fear and wonder. Perhaps, as Carl Sagan once said, we are like butterflies who flutter for a day and think it is forever. Maybe 3I Atlas is the mothership of some ancient civilization, pausing in sunlight older than humanity itself. Or maybe it is only a mirror, reflecting back our longing to find meaning in motion. Whichever truth awaits us on the far side of the sun, the story of 3I Atlas reminds us of a simple, humbling truth, that even in an age of data and precision, mystery still has a place among the stars. And sometimes, what looks like a maneuver is really a mirror, a reflection of our own yearning to understand the dance of creation unfolding quietly above us. When 3I Atlas slipped behind the sun in late October, the world seemed to hold its breath. For weeks, no telescope could see it, no probe could measure it, and no one could say whether it had vanished into darkness or slowed, waiting quietly near the light. In the stillness that followed, attention turned back to Earth, because as the mystery deepened above, another silence began to grow below the slow erasure of information. It began softly, like a dimming star. Videos vanished. Posts were flagged. Algorithms turned their gaze elsewhere. To most, it was an inconvenience. To others, a pattern. The silence of space had found its echo in our digital world. But this tension between discovery and discretion is not new. It has haunted us since the dawn of the space age. In 1961, during the Cold War, the Brookings Report warned NASA that proof of alien intelligence might shatter civilization. The authors wrote that such a discovery could trigger profound social disorganization and advised that information be managed with caution. More than 60 years later, those words feel like they were written for this moment. We live in an age when a single image can outpace light, when belief moves faster than verification. When 3I Atlas appeared, it became not just an object in the sky, but a mirror held up to human nature. How do we face the unknown when the unknown stares back? Avi Loeb once said, "The worst mistake in science is to assume that ignorance equals safety." Yet history shows that institutions often choose silence, not out of arrogance, but fear. Protecting the public from panic, filtering misinformation, these are noble intentions. But silence, even when kind, can begin to feel like control, and control, in an open world, breeds doubt. Some believe the quiet was calculated to buy time, to study, to prepare for what might follow. They point to NASA's sudden urgency with the Mars sample return mission. Officially, it's about soil and stone, but whispers say those titanium tubes might hold something more. A fragment of alloy, a pattern too perfect to be chance. If true, then the question of other intelligence is no longer cosmic, it's homeward bound. NASA denies this, of course. Engineers speak of schedules and budgets, not secrets. Yet timing can be its own message. As 3I Atlas neared the sun, the agency accelerated its timeline, compressing a decade of planning into a few short years. To some, it felt familiar, the same hush, the same polite insistence that nothing extraordinary waits in the light. It raises a larger question: how much truth can we bear at once? The fear in Brookings was never of aliens, it was of us. Of meaning collapsing, of faith dissolving under a sky too large to comprehend. In 1961, the fear was social. In 2025, it is existential. Because truth, once revealed, can no longer be controlled. It can only be faced. Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, "We are part of this universe. We are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. His words feel like a deep breath in the dark, a reminder that curiosity is our nature. Suppress it, and it only sinks deeper, glowing beneath the surface like starlight through fog. Perhaps governments are not hiding truth, but struggling to translate it. Science moves slowly, waiting for certainty. The cosmos rarely offers any. In that gap between question and proof, institutions hesitate, trying to shield the fragile trust of a species still learning how to gaze into infinity without blinking. If so, then their silence is not deception, but fear, a human kind of fear, quiet and trembling beneath the weight of the unknown. Still, silence is perilous. Where facts fade, imagination rushes in, and like air filling a vacuum, it brings stories, theories, and faith. Some false, some luminous, but all revealing the same truth. Our longing to understand is stronger than any system built to contain it. So the real question may not be whether something is hidden, but whether we are ready to see. The discovery of other minds through a radio whisper, a Martian artifact, or a visitor circling our sun would not simply rewrite science. It would change identity itself. It would remind us that our smallness is not punishment, but invitation. Carl Sagan once said, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love." Maybe that is what lies beneath the silence. Not conspiracy, but care. A fragile instinct to protect the human heart from the full glare of the infinite, but truth, like light, always finds its way through the cracks. And when it does, when the data unfolds and the sky breathes again, we will have to decide what to do with the knowledge we've spent centuries both fearing and chasing. Until then, the story of 3i Atlas remains suspended in that hush between inhale and exhale, a mirror held to the cosmos and to ourselves, a silence not of absence, but of waiting. And somewhere, in that silence, the faint pulse of light continues to move. As November faded into December, the world's telescopes waited like sleepless eyes turned toward dawn. For months, 3i Atlas had been invisible, hidden behind the burning veil of the sun, beyond the reach of every question. The silence that followed was heavy, like the pause before a heartbeat. Every observatory, every watcher, waited for light to return. And somewhere, beneath that waiting, humanity seemed to hold its breath together. The silence was not empty, it was alive, a hum beneath consciousness, the memory of the Brookings warning, the whispers of censorship, all folded into the stillness like dust in sunlight. And as the calendars turned to December, the universe began to stir again. In early winter, 3i Atlas would re-emerge from the solar glare. When it did, the world would finally learn whether this was a story of rumor or revelation. Across Earth, telescopes recalibrated, lenses glowed, screens flickered awake. The Keck in Hawaii, the VLT in Chile, the James Webb drifting in its cold orbit, all of them listening for a flicker of light. Even amateur astronomers waited beneath open skies, their breath ghosting into the air, their cameras humming softly in the dark. What they awaited was not beauty, but proof. If 3i Atlas returned on a straight path outward, it would fade into history. But if it curved, slowed, if it stayed, then everything we thought we knew about the sun, about life, about solitude would change forever. Avi Loeb spoke softly, as if careful not to break the quiet. "Science is the art of waiting for the universe to speak," he said. "Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it shouts." And for the first time in generations, humanity listened not for noise, but for breath. In the final nights before its return, the air itself seemed to hold tension. News feeds pulsed with countdowns. Professors spoke in half whispers. Strangers looked skyward longer than usual, feeling something wordless stirring beyond the horizon. It was as though the world had fallen into the same slow rhythm, the inhale before revelation. Then, just before dawn on December 3rd, a small observatory in South Africa broke the quiet. A young researcher, Leah Jacobs, noticed a faint shimmer near the sun's edge, a point of light trembling like a heartbeat through haze. Within hours, Other observatories confirmed. The traveler had returned, but its motion was strange. The data came in slow pulses, each number like a breath showing something that should not be. Its velocity had dropped, barely, but enough. The arc of its orbit bent inward into the sun's embrace. NASA hesitated, wrapped in caution. Official phrases arrived, cool and careful. Further verification required. Non-gravitational forces possible. But outside the agencies, silence broke into storm. Headlines filled with words like capture, deceleration, maneuver. The quiet, once protective, now felt like a cage. Neil deGrasse Tyson offered calm. The universe is under no obligation to behave according to our expectations. But when it surprises us, that's when discovery begins. His words settled softly over the noise, like dust on light. Days passed, and the numbers grew clear. The orbit was no longer hyperbolic. It had become bound. 3. Atlas had slowed, not died. It was no longer passing through, it was staying. Across the world, people gathered under cold skies. In churches, classrooms, cafes, even bedrooms, they watched live feeds of the sun, glowing, patient, cradling a point of silver light. Some prayed, some cried, some only breathed. For a rare moment, billions of hearts seemed to beat in rhythm with the same quiet awe. Carl Sagan once said, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." That line returned again and again, like a mantra whispered into the dark. Some called it the December revelation, others the pause of Atlas. But all agreed it felt like the moment between two eras of knowing. By mid-December, the data was undeniable. The sun had a companion now, faint and deliberate, orbiting in silence. No tail, no heat, only motion steady, graceful, impossibly calm. And in that calm, something within us shifted. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even joy. It was the quiet recognition that we were no longer alone. Not in the scientific sense, but in the spiritual one. The realization that the universe was listening too. Richard Feynman once said, "Nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns." December 2025 felt like one of those threads, a luminous line connecting curiosity, fear, and faith across generations. Whether 3i Atlas was vessel or stone, signal or coincidence, it had already done something no human technology could. It reminded us how to breathe with the stars. And as the sun set that final winter evening, people stood in the pale light, eyes lifted. The world was quiet. The air was still. Somewhere beyond sight, 3i Atlas traced its slow orbit, moving with the patience of eternity. In the silence between heartbeats, beneath the endless sky, the universe seemed to exhale. We too exhaled with it. And so, we arrive at the quiet edge of the story. The light of 3i Atlas fades beyond the glare of the sun, and what remains is not certainty but wonder. Maybe the question was never about the object itself. Maybe it was always about us, about how we react when the universe stops being a backdrop and starts looking back. If we knew, truly knew that we were not alone, would we reach out with open hands or close our doors and listen for footsteps in the dark? In a cosmos that might be teeming with minds far older than ours, silence could be safety, but silence could also mean we never learn what it truly means to belong to something larger. The stars, after all, have always spoken in paradox. They burn with creation and destruction at once. And somewhere between fear and fascination lies the fragile place where curiosity lives. The part of us that still dares to look up and whisper, times what if? Asterisk. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine that distant traveler still circling the sun, patient and unhurried, like an unanswered question written in light. Whether it's a machine, a miracle, or just a piece of cosmic debris, it has already done something extraordinary. It's made us pause, together, and feel the weight of the unknown. If stories like this make you wonder too, about science, about mystery, about our tiny place in the grand design, then stay close. Subscribe, follow, Keep your telescope aimed at the sky with us, because here, in bedtime science stories, every night is another chance to listen to the universe whisper back.